Welcome to the Skills First Beginner Workshops for developing your enterprising skills. I'm Kathleen Webb, the founder and president of Skill Squirrel, and it is my pleasure for Skill Squirrel to host this series for Biz Coach Services. Today is our third session for exploring your job and/or career potential. This presentation will introduce you to concepts for thinking big, exploring who you are and your potential, and focusing on what you can do. Our presenter from BizCoach Services is Vern Vautour. Vern has more than 35 years of experience providing small business coaching, training, and consulting. His many accomplishments include presenting small business, life, and career planning workshops for the cities of Toronto, Mississauga, St. Catharines, various colleges and universities, and many nonprofits and Indigenous organizations. He has also adjudicated and provided training for business pitch competitions, and he has held senior operations and marketing management positions with major franchises. Plus, Vern won a major national award in best practices in youth entrepreneurship training in Canada. Now, over to you, Vern.
Thank you, Kathleen. Today's topic, and welcome everyone. Today's topic is exploring your job and your career potential. And this workshop is probably going to be of much benefit to people who are exploring their career paths, looking at what they would like to do. And there's lots of thought processes going on during this presentation. So it's a me-oriented thinking type exercise that you want to spend time to analyze. So it's fairly long, but for the most part, it's form-based so that you can put your own notes and develop your own thoughts to discover what you should or can be doing and to look at all the different opportunities. So today we'll talk about talents and abilities versus what I like to do, your work personality preferences. We'll do a SWOT analysis, a gap analysis. I'm going to introduce you to the Skills and Competencies Taxonomy as put out by Service Canada, which is, by the way, excellent. They've taken years to perfect it, but it's actually really good. And we should look at our work preferences for employment and access. So it's a very important thing to think about so that we can decide not so much, well, what we'd like to do, but also eliminate the things that we don't want to do. I always say, love what you do and the money will follow. So one of the things that I'll start out with is talking about our talents and our abilities. So what are our abilities? What do we like to do? What don't we like to do? So here's sort of the exercises that I've put together in terms of talking about what your likes are and what your talents are. So we should start out by making a big list of what we like to do. What is it that that motivates you, that encourages you to move forward, that you get excited about, that you'd love to do when you wake up in the morning? And then match that up with your talents and abilities. So does the what I like to do match the talent and abilities? So if they don't, where are the gaps? So we're going to do a gap analysis. We'll show that to you later. And so what you want to do is discover, here's what I like to do. Here are my talents and abilities, but this is what I'm missing. The next step we want to take is we want to look at our work personality preferences. And so we're talking about people, things, data, and creativity. You have a natural demeanor or a natural propensity to working with people, things, data, and creativity. Some people are great at and suited for some, and some people are not suited for some. So we have to look at what that blend is. So I have a little chart here. There's actually a link to DPT, people, data, things, and data, and on the bottom. And I got this from the job bank years ago, but I've been using it since before the job bank, to be honest. And so one of the things that we look at is we look at working with people, working with things, working with data, and people who lean towards creativity. Now, what's interesting is that for example, I worked with a company with 95 staff. and we had to do hiring every year. It was a seasonal business. And the point is that for the different positions, I actually did this little graph. So just to show you an example, we had positions where you had to deal with the public all the time. So you definitely needed somebody with really strong people skills. On the other hand, they didn't have to work with things. So working with things is low. Working with people was very high. Working with data was low. And potentially when dealing with clients, there had to be some creativity involved in terms of people skills, in terms of, moving people in different directions, what have you. So that one position, you can see that the work personality that was required for that one position was different than another position. So in this case, this was a greeter in a tourist attraction, a big tourist attraction. So they were a greeter. They had to take on literally hundreds of people coming in per hour at this training facility. Then on the other hand, that was a greeter. Then we had people who took photography. This is a photo concession, by the way. And then what would happen is the person working with people, they'd have to have people skills for taking photography, and they had to be fairly strong in working cameras, working backgrounds, etc. And data wasn't important, but creativity was a little bit higher. So as you can see, different jobs require different personality traits and demeanor. On the other hand, we had people that captured the image and sat on computers all day long, and ultimately they didn't work with the people at all. So what would happen is their people skills were not ranked as high. We didn't need high people skills, but they worked with things and they worked with data, and they had to be highly creative to create the images. So again, you've got a different personality. And so every job, no matter what the job is, has a certain requirement as it results to people, things, data, and creativity. It doesn't matter what job it is. So when you're looking at particular jobs that you might be interested in, go to this graph and say, okay, well, that's what this job takes, and then look at your own skills. So if you make a comparison, for example, and you don't have some of the skill requirements. So for example, you match the people skills are low, then potentially you don't want to work in the public. You may or may not be suited. That, or you get training for it. It's simple as that. So if I'm not working, so it really depends. You look at the job and you figure out what's required as it relates to the job. So when it comes to working with people, that might include things like persuading, speaking, signaling, serving, mentoring, instructing, consulting, negotiating, supervising. So those are the skills that are needed. So what you do is you take this chart and you basically say, okay, well, let's look at this position here. I certainly have, this persuading skills. I have the speaking skills. I have the assisting skills, but I don't have mentoring abilities or instructing. Maybe I don't have supervising. So these are abilities that I need. And so, or I have, and then what do I need or want to learn? Or there's no interest. So again, you have, you can use a numbered system, as I've pointed out up here. I have no or low skills, low abilities, some are average, high or above. I'm expert or I'm very high. So those are the types of measurements that we might do on a chart like this. So now what we're doing is we're actually taking stock. We're taking inventory of ourselves. And that's why I mentioned earlier, it's a you-guided presentation where you get the notes from this, and you'll be able to fill out these forms, and you'll be able to look at, examine who you are, what you want to do, what your strengths and weaknesses are, etc. Then in terms of working with things, right? So That might include precision working, setting up, controlling, driving, operating and manipulating equipment, tending, feeding, off-bearing, handling. Those are just some of the things. So the question becomes, do I have skills and abilities, and how would I rank myself? And do I need to learn? Do I need to learn it, or do I want to learn it, or I'm not interested? This helps get you set up in terms of what we want out of our lives, and doing the jobs that we want to work towards in terms of what we love to do. Same with working with computing, right? Computing might include things like copying, comparing, synthesizing, coordinating, analyzing, and compiling. So again, I have to rank myself on my skills and on my ability, and whether I need it or want to learn it, or I'm not interested. So once I do this, then it's going to give me a bigger picture, a better picture to work with. And often a lot of people don't think about that. They go for a job interview, they like the title, or they like, you know, the main duties or whatever, but they don't dig in and deep enough to find out if it's a really good fit for them. At the end of the day, you're looking for an employer, or you're looking for self-employment, or you're looking for work or a job or something that fits and matches your personality. So it's really good to give yourself some time to examine all this stuff and look at all these things and consider them. So again, working with creativity, you need people who are adapters, willing to take risks, visual thinkers, can work out problems, explore the possibilities, and challenge the status quo. So again, what are the skills you have? What are the abilities? Do you need it or want to learn it, or I'm not interested? Again, reflection is really going to help you make strides in deciding and working towards your goals in life. What I find is that there's a lot of employment agencies around that help people to get jobs. And one of the biggest problems is budget. I'm not, on the one hand, I'm sort of knocking down, but on the other hand, I'm recognizing that there's potentially not some problems, but some challenges. And the challenges are, there's only so many jobs that are open, number one. Number two, what happens is that people get, I'll say, potentially railroaded, because there might be some certain jobs in a certain industry that are open, and then people want to get into those jobs, but they're not a good fit. So if we do this self-reflection, we'll find that we'll end up making better choices for ourselves. And potentially, if we can communicate what our wants are and where our strengths and weaknesses are, then we can ultimately speak to the people at employment agencies or HR consultants or what have you, and we can speak with them and let them know what we're all about and what we're looking for. So if we look at this SWOT analysis, right? Your strengths, it's a snapshot about who you are. So you've heard about SWOT. A lot of people have heard about it and sometimes don't realize, you know, how it's broken down. But basically, strengths and weaknesses are internal. That's about you, about me, maybe the company I work for, what have you. The opportunities and threats are external. They're external. We have no control over them, right? So as it relates to our strengths, we want to list what our strengths are and be brutally honest about our strengths and weaknesses. So when we look at our personal strengths and we know what a job needs or a job requires or a career choice requires, we have to look at our strengths and maybe measure it up against a job or a position that we want to get. So what are my personal strengths? And then how can I take advantage of that? On the other side, what about my personal weaknesses? Everyone has them. And if you're brutally honest with this, it's going to help you, because what you're doing is you're recognizing that weakness. And then what we can do is we can say, well, what can we do to overcome that weakness? Maybe we need training. Maybe we need to polish our skills. Maybe there's courses that we need to take. Maybe this position isn't for me at this time. So maybe I need more experience, or all these things come to mind. This is why we have to get into self-reflection. Now, even though I might have personal strengths and weaknesses, I might I might be great at them, but on the other hand, I have to look at the other parts, the opportunities and threats. So what, as it relates to current events, what are some of the trends in the marketplace? So what are the opportunities that are there, and how do they fit in with my strengths and my weaknesses, especially my strengths? And then how can I take advantage of those opportunities in the market? When I look at current events and trends, I also have to look at possible threats. You know, SARS and COVID and the changing climate, all these things factor in. The type of work that we want to do. So what we want to look at in terms of current event and trends is what can I do to avoid the threats in the marketplace? Like AI, artificial intelligence is one of the fastest growing areas right now. Can I join it? Can I, fit into that industry? Can I fit? Maybe I don't want to. Maybe I don't need to, right? So I have to look at everything and weigh everything out. So that leads to the gap analysis. So where are you now? Where would you like to be? And what's needed to get there? So I've made this little chart. And basically what you want to do is you want to look at your performance, like as it relates to, and just take one of these items on the right-hand side, one at a time. So as it relates to my strengths, what's my situation now? Where would I like to be in the future? What do I need to get there? And what's missing? So what is it that I need to get there, right? So I do the same thing for each of these. I look at my weaknesses. So what's my situation now? Where do I want to be in the future? What's needed? What do I need to get there? So instead of being reactive and giving up, what we want to do is we want to be proactive, and we want to make sure that we seek the solutions to getting to where we want. So looking at trends and opportunities and competitive position, our productivity, our skills, the resources we have, and our attitude, we have to look at ourselves now. Think about where we'd like to be in the future, and then work on what's missing. So really, this helps you to be proactive. It helps you to put lists together. So it's an invaluable measuring and strategic planning tool. Improvement takes time, but at least the gap analysis gives you an opportunity to plan and scale your business for better performance in steps over time. Now, what's interesting is that there's like I mentioned earlier, Service Canada has put out skills and competencies taxonomy, which I feel is a measurable for someone to actually look at the different career demands. There are a lot of things that an HR consultant or an HR person or the hiring team at a company really need to look at. So many different facets. That's why I put the diamond there. The diamond has many facets. So you as an individual, when you're being scrutinized, looked at, considered for a position, or you're considering a career position, you have to look at some of the different things, the skills, personal abilities and attributes, knowledge, interests, work contexts, etc. So for example, if I go to the first one, skills, you need foundational. Potentially you're being examined on the following. Some you need, some you don't need. Again, it's all about degrees. It's all about the amount of skills and experience that you have, plus your attitudes, etc. So there's foundational skills, analytical, technical, resource management, and interpersonal. A lot of agencies have tools that they can use to either give you tests or question you on your resume or your background or on your experiences, and all those things become important. That's why making up questions and surveys when you're being interviewed are very important, because they are looking for certain things. So for example, depending on position, you might be looking at personal abilities and attributes. So again, there's cognitive, physical, psychomotor, sensory and personal qualities. Now, again, I'm going to just lean on this fact. I believe philosophically that every single human being on the face of this planet is gifted. There's no such thing as a disability, but I would rather focus on ability. So maybe some of us might have some disabilities, but you know what? Looking at this list, we definitely have deficits in some areas. Whether we're physically disabled, mentally, whatever, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, we need to focus on what our gift is, what we can do, not what we can't do. And if we want to take something on to prove to the world that you can do it, by all means do it. But you really have to dig down deep and make it work. So at the end of the day, we have to look at some of these things. When we look at knowledge that we have to possess, every industry has a different set of knowledge. So either we get an education or we get experience, or some of us have a natural knack for things. So we've got different industries like business, finance, management, communication, education and training, engineering and technology, health services, law, government, public safety, math and sciences, manufacturing and production, and more. There's lots of different industries. What I find interesting, given all the knowledge in the world, I really know nothing. I mean, really, when we look at ourselves as a human being, yes, we're gifted, but we don't know everything. So if we focus on the things that we love to do and focus on the things that we're designed to do, it's amazing how much happier we'll be in life. Then there's career demands by interests. So there's a couple of the Holland codes. The RIASEC stands for realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. There's lots of different tests, surveys, questionnaires, etc., that help people to realize whether these interests are work for us or not. And then, of course, there's the Canadian Work Preference Inventory, or the CWPI. And that measures whether we're directive, innovative, methodical, objective, and social. So when we know all these things and we go for a certain position, if we go to these lists and we know that we're going to be interviewed, you know, for heaven's sakes, just do a quick once over to realize that when you're being interviewed, there's so many different levels that we're being interviewed on. When we look at the context of the work that we do, we're looking at structural job characteristics, the physical work environment, physical demands, interpersonal relations, and work values. So again, you know, context comes into play. And then work activities come into play, the different types of things that we have to do, information input, work output, mental processes, interacting with others, service and care provision. Then, on top of that, we also have tools and technology. These are the things that we need to work with. So we might have to know how to, or have an interest in, or have skills or experience in working with cleaning supplies, equipment, consumer electronic products, IT, broadcasting and telecom, medical equipment, mining and well drilling and machinery, tools and general machinery, and there's more. I mean, the list is endless. There's so many jobs and positions. There is nothing in the world that if you set your mind to that you can't do on the one hand, but on the other hand, there's so much that the world has to offer. So we want to make sure that we take into consideration all the different competencies. I think, did I miss a slide? Hang on. No, I got it. My apologies. So this is a summary of the skills and competencies taxonomy. The URL is on the bottom. It actually takes you to that page, and it delves into the topics that we just talked about. We'll also be providing this information later. So now what we need to do is we actually have to look at our work preferences, and access to employment. So some of the things that we have to think about is the job environment that we work in. our workplace environment, our work preferences. You know, it's easy when you just think of the job you want, you know exactly what you want. But some people are interested in working in different environments. I had a client last year who worked in construction. He wanted to become a construction estimator, and he actually had to go back to school. He worked 13 years installing insulated glass units on high-rise towers, business buildings, 57 stories up, a job I could never do. But anyway, you know, he wanted to change. He'd been doing it for 13 years. His safety record was good, but he realized that his youth, you know, he was going into his mid-30s, and it's not that he didn't have the energy level and whatever. He really liked his work, but the problem is that things change over time, right? So he realizes that he can't do this forever, and he needs to shift. He needs to go into a different direction. So he decided that he wanted to change the environment, but he still wanted to stay in construction. So he actually helped him to figure out what courses he could take in construction estimation. So construction estimation is made up of about, I don't know, 18 courses, 3 years it takes to complete all the courses. And they are empirical relationships, meaning that you have to take one before you're allowed to take the other. So construction estimating sounded like a really good job for him. It means that he's still in the industry. He's got the experience behind him. So those are the types of things that we have to look for. But when we're starting out in our job, maybe a job for the first time, or maybe we're transitioning through life, these are some of the things that we need to consider. So I've made up these handy little charts, and it's going to take a few minutes to get through them all. I think there's 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever, but we'll get through them all. And this is basically as it relates to aptitudes, right? So we have general learning ability. So verbal ability, numerical ability, spatial perception, form perception, clerical perception, motor coordination, finger dexterity, manual dexterity. Why are all these things important? Well, they could be important, right? So what we don't want to do is if we don't have the finger dexterity, or we can't get what we need in order to do that. So if we have a disability, we have to think about what can we do, not what we can't do, right? And is there a way to fix it? So I've created these little charts to go over all the different things that we need as it relates to job environment, to working environment, to the workplace, and what our preferences are. So as you can see in the chart, I have these columns, and these columns are, it's, you know, excellent. I'll just take that away. So we have a column that says excellent. So my verbal abilities, excellent, or my numerical abilities is excellent, or it's good and with the desire to practice. So I do have good ability. I have this added aptitude for motor coordination or spatial or whatever it is. Like, and what you do is you basically just fill out the charts and you go, okay, well, I'm really good at this. It's good, and I have a desire to practice this. There are some barriers, but there are simple fixes to it. I have limited ability, but because I really would like to do this job, I can do it with adaptations. So I need to figure out what those adaptations look like. Or it's a showstopper. This is not doable, right? I'm not so sure that, you know, having a physical disability may not allow me to be a tree cutter or an arborist, right? There's certain things that are required. So I have to be realistic about what jobs require. So I can look up jobs. In one of our other workshops, we get into the National Occupational Classification. We actually look at job descriptions. We look at trends. Those are the types of things that we want to look at. But every job, there are requirements. There's aptitudes that are required. There's also interests. So you'll see by these charts that you want to go through this. So if there's a certain job you want, what you want to do is you can ignore half the things in this sheet, for example, but it really depends on the job or the kind of work that we're looking for. So when we look at interests, for example, do we have interests on a social level, objective, methodical, or innovative? So are we excellent at that? Or we're good and we have a desire to practice it, or we have barriers, but with simple fixes, or we have limited ability, but we need adaptation. So with adaptations, we can do it. So it's interesting. Maybe it's a showstopper and it's not doable. But the point is that if it's limited ability, but we need adaptations, if we can describe what those adaptations are, we can confidently go to an employer and say, look, I have limited ability to do this, but with these adaptations, and you actually list them, and here's where you can get the funding for it or whatever, I would make a great employee. Boom, like all of a sudden you're hired. So it's those kinds of things, like realizing what we have as it relates to our skills and abilities, what we love to do, and finding a way. So there's physical things. So go to the next list. So sometimes there's jobs that have physical requirements like strength, like body position, limb coordination, vision, color discrimination, hearing, verbal interaction, smelling, scent. Can you imagine not being able to smell and being a tester for tea or coffee? It's not going to work, right? So again, like, we have to be realistic, but at the same time, there's a lot of things we can do with adaptations, and we need to describe what those adaptations are. So again, this is a list that talks about those physical things. Then by location. So again, we need to, as it relates to job environments, do we want to work in a regulated inside environment, an unrelegated inside environment? Because at the end of the day, we might work inside, but there might be chemicals and poisons and things that we're potentially allergic to or whatever. Same with, do we like to work outside, or do we like to work in a vehicle or a cab? So I might be driving a truck or what have you, or would I like to work from home? So those are the types of things that I have to be comfortable with. Maybe there's barriers with simple fixes. Maybe we have limited ability, we need some adaptations, or it's a showstopper, it's not doable. So I'm going over quite a number of things to make you think, to have you think about all this in terms of what's possible, what are the opportunities, because there's so much out there, right? By hazards, right? So some people don't mind working around dangerous chemicals. Somebody's got to do the job, and somebody has to love it. Equipment, machinery, tools, working around electricity, radiation. Maybe there's flying particles around and falling objects, fire, stream, hot surfaces, dangerous locations. I have an uncle that worked for it's an aluminum company, Conair. They made aluminum, and they did the extrusions, and that basically hold the windows on buildings, right? They made all the extrusions. And I actually went to his workplace just before he retired to visit him and see what he did. And they got the aluminum, they extrude it, and then they have to anodize it, which means they have to drop it into a liquid, gosh knows what it is, chemical. And these pieces of extrusion are like 60 feet long, and they're all on racks. And he's over top of, on a walkway, over top of all this stuff, and he drops the whole load of aluminum down into tanks, and they're anodized, treated, I guess. And then they come out, and then they go into painting if they're going to be painted, etc. But he did this for 35, 40 years. So talk about having lots of training and experience and working around dangerous chemicals, etc. And he loved it. So, somebody has to do the job, and not every job is pleasant, but at the same time, we have to learn, and we have to decide whether we like to do it or not do it. So there you go. My nephew, for example, he He's an electrician by trade, and he's worked for in industrial electricity. And now, for whatever reason, he's now doing a fireman course. Geez, let's go from dangerous to more dangerous. But he likes it. It's what he wants to do, and he's young and strong. And you know, if he's got the skills and the abilities, and he wants to do it, then go for it. So now we have to look at maybe discomforts. So we look at job environments by discomfort. There might be noise involved, vibration, odors, non-toxic dusts, wetness. There's all kinds of environments that we may or may not, can or cannot work with, right? So again, this it's comfortable, maybe minor issues, I can do it. Barriers with simple fixes, limited ability, and we need adaptations, or that's a showstopper. So for example, I used to be a volunteer. I got my lifeguard certificate. I used to be a master swimmer. And what happened over the years is I developed an acute allergy to chlorine, and I can't go near it. So that's a job that I can and will never be able to take, just because of that allergy. So again, it's all about recognizing what we can do and what we can't do, what we're willing to do and want to do, and whether there are adaptations that we can take. When we look at working in a business or office environment, there's actually 2 pages here, but we have to work with computers, computer access, webcams, cameras, mics, high-speed internet, phone privacy, working, have a desk, a chair, lighting might be important. All those things are important in a business or office environment, as well as computer and keyboard skills, phone use, spreadsheets, word processing, PowerPoint, customer relations management software, bookkeeping software, and more. So the point is that, do we have these skills? What do we need if we don't have them? So when we look at job descriptions, whatever, to find out what it is that we need to know what it is that we need. We need to know whether we're expert at it, whether we're good, whether we're interested in it, not interested. Maybe we need training, maybe we need adaptations, maybe it's not doable. So we have to be brutally honest with ourselves. When we look at work type, what kind of work do you want to do? And often what happens is, and this is what I find, I worked in an employment agency, and I found that all kinds of people got placed, but they were pushed into positions. Here's a job, go and apply for it. They get it, and 2 weeks later they quit. Why? There's no reason for that. The reason is that they didn't take the time to understand themselves, what they liked and what they didn't like. Yes, it was great. I got a job, I got a paycheck, but I don't like working weekends. I don't like working evenings. I don't like working at this time or that time. So if we sit down and we go through these lists before we actually decide on what we want to do in our lives, it's going to make it so much easier. And don't forget, over time, as we age, we shift, we go through different shifts and phases in our life. So there is a point where I'm going to be too old to do a certain thing, or I'm not going to be interested, or what have you. So there you go. So you've got, for work type, do I want to work? So here, this chart is a little bit different. So what's ideal? What's acceptable? What's somewhat acceptable? What is I'm not interested in, right? And then I can make a little wish list here in the comment section. So I have to look at casual work, temporary, seasonal, permanent short term, permanent long-term work, volunteer on the job training, So volunteer on the job training means no pay, on the job training with pay. Again, we have to put our preferences down. Wouldn't it be great when you went to a job interview and somebody asks you, tell me what you're gifted at, tell me what you like doing, and you're able to list all those things. And then when the employer tells you about the job, you might be expected to work evenings, or you might be expected to work weekends. Is that acceptable? You have to decide. And if you're not ready with the answers, you potentially end up taking a position, a job, or a career change that didn't work for you. So it's very important to think about all this. I know there's a lot of material that we're going through, but let's look at hours and shifts. How many days would you like to work per week? What days are you available? What are your ideal start times and end times? Do you want to work days, evenings, weekends? Will you work statutory holidays? Can you be on call? So again, like all these things we need to think about. I know when I was younger, I worked as a forklift operator in my teens for Hostess potato chips, which is now Lay's. And the shift was fantastic. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon till 11. At 11 p.m., I got out. I could still go out with my friends and then sleep in all day and go swimming and whatever. So again, that was ideal at that point in my life. So you can see that you have to consider everything. Now we can look at by hours per week. How many hours do you want to work a week? What's ideal, right? What's ideal? 5 to 10 hours. I want part-time, but I want part-time 21 to 25, or I only want part-time 5 to 10 hours a week, right? Or I want to work 21 to 25 hours, or I want to work 36 to 40. You know what's interesting? Go to a job interview for a job, and you're talking to the employer, and the employer says, well, we need you 11 to 20 or 21 to 25 hours a week, and you happen to be in a position where you don't want that many hours. So because you did this and you know what your ideal is, you could basically say, well, my ideal would be, and you give them the hours, and the next thing you know, you got the hours you wanted. Why? Because you put it in the employer's mind. You were brutally honest with them, and they worked to make it work for you. So instead of hiring a second person at 11 to 20 hours, they hired a second person for 5 to 10 hours, and they made it work because they saw some value in you. So it's really important to understand who you are, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do, what you're interested in, what you're not interested in. Even mode of travel, right? This is something that's really important. And that is, do I have to walk? Do I have to drive? Do I want to drive a bike? Do I have to get driven by someone? Do I have a vehicle and I would drive? Do I need to take private transit or public transit, a bus, etc.? So going to the next slide, I have to ask these questions. Where do I live? What are the main intersecting streets? How long does it take to walk to the nearest bus on weekdays? Because if I work evening shifts, in some neighborhoods, there are no buses after 8 p.m. or after 10 p.m. So I have to know, so I have to consider everything, because at the end of the day, I want to be happy. I want to love my life. So again, like how long to the nearest bus? Evenings and weekends and go back one. And what's the maximum time you would travel one way? I've lived in the city of Toronto, and I've had jobs where it took 2.5 hours just by transit to get to work. Heaven forbid by car, right? But the point is what's the maximum time you would travel one way? Those are the things you need to think about. So, in summary, know yourself. Know yourself. These are all the things that we want to examine potentially for a career change, potentially for a job, potentially for the place that we are in life today. So the question becomes, do you know your abilities and what you like to do? Do you know your work style? Do you have the strengths to seize the opportunities? Do you have the skills and competencies needed for the job or career you're looking for? And do you know your work preferences? So those are questions you need to ponder. So thank you, and for giving me the chance to do this presentation, and I hope you enjoyed it.